Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 7 of Enigmatica 2 in the Pit of Despair. That's not because this build is going to be called the Pit of Despair, that's because figuring out how to build this is making me despair. But today is not a day to be sad. Today is a day to make progress. And as you might be able to see from my pins over here, there's a lot of it to go around. So let's start by defining our goals, now in post-processing. The main one, as I'd mentioned last episode, is to improve our ME system. And to support this, we want to improve our power generation and our resource collection. Resource collection will come from the digital miner, which we are now in a position to unlock, and power generation will come from advanced generators. Because, if you look at this list, they can use ethylene, which we're already making. Now, one thing worth noting is that I'm going to attempt this with no tutorial. I'm just looking at JEI and hoping it's correct. But we'll start with a small one, just to be sure. We're gonna need a few weird processors. One thing to note is that this mod uses an ungodly amount of these basic coils from Actually Editions. And once I remember to craft enough aluminum, we can start making these into iron tubing and redstone iron wiring, which allows us to make the gas turbine. But as you can tell from the tooltip, there are a lot of things that go into this multi-block. Energy emitters, input valves, and gas mixers. And all that's left now are the actual turbines. You can see the options here, and the best ones are the Enderium turbines. But if you'll recall, we didn't set Enderium up last episode because we didn't have enough platinum. Well, I've gone ahead and changed that. One nether platinum ore gives us 6 dust per ore, which is crazy good. And thanks to that and an additional system I've set up, we can request over 500 Enderium ingots. It might take just a little bit though. And that's the last of them. We now have 550 Enderium, which we can use to make 400 turbine blades and 50 turbines. Now we're ready to set it up, and I've made this little platform here towards the back to place it down. We'll put the energy output down first. That is a nice texture, wow. The controller on top, fuel tank on one side, and then a fuel air mixer and a gas mixer. The rest is all turbines. With the multi-block formed, we can open up the menu and see that at its peak, this will be able to make 80,000 RF per tick. Assuming, of course, we provide it with a fuel. In order to power this thing, we're going to want to make ethylene again. Everything's set up, and you might notice the actual start of a second turbine here, but this is, again, an ethylene system. The crushers crush melon, the PRC combines that biofuel and hydrogen from an electrolytic separator into ethylene, and this time the ethylene is going into a rotary condensator to make liquid ethylene. While this gas turbine can run on either type, there is actually a pretty major bug in the pack right now. If you feed it the gas version of ethylene, it will not be consumed, period. It just sits in here making you free unlimited power. And while that's great, that's not how I want to play myself. So I'm going to do it the correct way and use liquid ethylene. Let's plug it into power, hook it up, and see what happens. Well, it's working, but I think it would work a little bit better if I remembered to give it speed upgrades. That's much better. You'll notice that despite it being full, it's only producing a little bit of RF because it doesn't really see a need. All that it's powering right now is this stuff right here. In fact, I can remove the power cell, and we can see it doesn't have to use all that much. And with the other 50 turbines done, we can get our other generator up and running. Together, these should be able to make 160,000 RF, which is pretty solid. All that's left to do now is to take this power and send it to our AE2 system and everything else. But if you look at the tooltip, you might notice that there's a limit to it. 250,000 RF per tick. And while we're not running into that now, it might be a good idea to future-proof this. Enter the Quantum Entangloporter. This is Mechanism's all-in-one transport solution. Power, items, fluids, it can do them all. And for the most part, it's not that expensive. In fact, we can make the teleporter frames right now. Same story with the matter beamer. And the teleporter itself is not bad at all. The dragon hearts are a little bit more of a problem, but we might have a solution for that later on. For now, I have 10 that I got exploring around previously, and I think that'll be just fine. No, the only tricky part about this craft is the intricate circuit board, which requires these ultimate control circuits right here. Why are they tricky? Because they need to be made in an empowerer. It's a bit of a weird craft, but none of this is stuff that we haven't encountered before. The only new thing is some type of quartz that we have to throw in front of the atomic reconstructor. Now we can make display stands and the empowerer itself, once it decides to recognize the battery NBT. To use this, we want to place down the empowerer, and then 4 display stands 2 blocks away from it. Then you put the item to infuse in the middle, and the supporting items on the stands. Now, we wait. And get our ultimate control circuit. They can be put into our carpenter, and after it slowly does its job, we get our intricate circuit boards, and can make our quantum entangloporters. In them, we can set a network, and configure the sides for it. And if you look at the tooltip, you can see that it has a capacity of 25 million, which is 100 times better than this guy, which can do 250,000. So I'd say it's definitely worth it, even though they're definitely tedious to make. Alright, so now that we have our power set up, I went ahead and gave it a stress test, and it worked fine, even when it was trying to produce the full 80,000 per tick. All of our systems here were able to keep up, but now that we have this as a solid foundation, I think it's time that we do something a little bit more fun. Something called the digital miner. The hardest part of crafting it is the ultimate control circuit, which we now have, meaning that once AE2 decides to recognize NBT data, we can make our digital miner. I'm going to immediately head to the deep dark, and if we place it down, we can see that in addition to it being pretty huge, there's an energy input port where we can connect to our network and give it a filter. Although it is quite slow, a couple speed upgrades should help with that. This is a bit more like it. I'm going to chunk load this guy, and I'll come back to this in a little bit and see how we're doing. Well, it wasn't quite as fast as I would have hoped, but this is what we got out of it. Plus 2 more drawers, almost entirely full. So I am declaring this a huge success. But now that all of our ores have been processed down and we are considerably richer, let's put them to use by upgrading our ME system. And we're going to start with 36 more ME controllers, which we cannot craft. Well, we can't craft it because our CPUs are not big enough. As I was saying, we are going to craft 36 ME controllers. Let's see if our system can handle it. All of this crafting has definitely had an effect on our power generation. Well, we have our controllers, but it's probably a good thing that we're in the process of updating our ME system because that was a little bit slow. Now, because I don't want to mess up our existing system while I build the new one, I'm going to put the ME controller further down, and then we'll just be able to connect everything back up. Currently unfinished, but as you can imagine, it's going to be a 5x5x5 once we cannibalize this guy. This time, we're going to avoid power fluctuations with a dense energy cell. We'll be making more ME drives. We can set up some more patterns. I went ahead and moved the terminals, as well as making this path off center. I went ahead and moved the terminals, and now we can start placing down our new disk drives. Obviously, we'll have more eventually, but for now, this should be fine. Over to the right will be our drawer setup for all bulk materials. I'm also going to place down the energy cell, the energy acceptor, and our quantum entangloporter, which is connected to our power generation. And now we can see that our controller lights up, even if at the moment it's not doing anything. I went ahead and set up 12 fresh P2P tunnels in this new controller. They should all be ready to be hooked up onto this, assuming, of course, we disconnect it from this one. Otherwise, yeah, it's gonna be real angry that it sees 2 controllers on the network. But now, I do think that we're ready to break this controller and start copying everything over. If something goes horribly wrong, well, you'll hear about it. Well, nothing went horribly wrong. I went ahead and did a lot of boring work off camera. It's been a couple days for me, but we now have these 4 interface and molecular assembler towers. We have a wall of compacting drawers full of important materials. And on the other side, we've gone from 1 crafting CPU to 12, which is a hell of an upgrade. And I've been doing more than just this. I actually moved the whole controller even further down. This is going to play into our eventual build here. I doubled up on the P2P tunnels, we now have 24, and I have spent a lot of time gathering resources. And if you have a keen eye, you might notice some that are going to be important for upcoming tech. I've set up these new machines like the compactor for more gears, and 3 new induction smelters for on-demand crafting. Now, why did I set all of this up? Well, it's a bit of a chicken and egg scenario. We now have these machines, but they're not that fast. It's passable, but I think we can do better. So to help them along, I wanted to make the upgrade kits. And the first one, super easy. The second one is very manageable. But the third one requires cryothium dust, which is something that we have not dealt with before. It's made from snowballs, redstone, and blizz powder. The snowballs I've set up back here. This is a glacial precipitator, which turns water into snowballs. Rather than having it on demand, it's just controlled by a level emitter. The blizz powder is going to be a lot more interesting. This comes from blizz rods, and to get these, we need to kill blizzes. But rather than go out and hunt for them, I figured that we would bring them here. That's why I've gone out and captured one in this mob imprisonment tool, and why we're going to be making a mob duplicator. The mob duplicator is not that bad. The dolls have a weird recipe, but at the end of the day, they are not expensive at all. All we need is some ink and nether wart. No, the only challenge of this item is the signalum cell frame. This is made with a lot of redstone, but more importantly, a lot of new materials. So I think we should just start from the top. The first part of this is the energy cell frame, made in a metallurgic infuser. We can encode a recipe for it, and drop it into our terminal. Now, we should be able to craft some. Now we can request it, and move on to the next step, which is using our newly made empowerer to turn it into the hardened cell frame. We then take this, and empower it with a steel casing, invar plate, iron rod, and invar gear. And by iron rod, I of course mean steel rod. I would never mess something like that up. And after that little bit of waiting, we have our hardened cell frame, which we can now upgrade into the reinforced version once we sort all this stuff out. The Electrum large plate needs a block of Electrum through a metal press. In order to make the flux crystals and the fluxed Electrum plate, we're going to need a new fluid transposer. And of course, the magma crucible. I'll spare your ears this time. I'm going to set these up in a new little nook in our hallway. And we want to set it so that redstone will get drawn into the magma crucible, which pushes it out and directly into the fluid transposer. Because the things we want to make, flux crystals and fluxed electrum, both get made with destabilized redstone. And on the other side, we want to make sure that it's electrum and diamonds getting brought into the fluid transposer. We can give them a quick test. The redstone will melt and come in here to infuse the diamonds, which return into our ME system. And now that I've encoded the patterns, we can now auto-craft fluxed electrum ingots. And there we go. We can now make 2 reinforced cell frames. Turning this into the full version is going to require lumium in our fluid transposer. Oh my god, is this slow. And there we go. our full reinforced cell frame. All that's left now is the Signalum version. And spoiler alert, but I've already done this. The Signalum plates are whatever. The new items here are rich slag, cinnabar, and rosin. Cinnabar can be gotten in a variety of ways, but what I did was used our digital miner to get thousands of redstone ore, and then just threw all of them through the crusher. There's a 1 in 4 chance of getting a cinnabar, which means that we now have 1200, which is more than we will need in this pack. Rich slag is much the same. If you melt sand and quartz in the induction smelter, there's a 50% chance you'll get it. And with a digital miner, getting quartz in the nether is a piece of cake. So we have over 1,000 of that too. If you don't want to go that route, a fun one is to use a clock in the induction smelter, because it just melts into 4 gold, which you can immediately craft back into a clock, and just loop this forever. The final component is rosin, which comes from resin in a fractionating still. Here, there's no funny loop. I just took 4 arboreal extractors, placed them against some trees so they would produce resin, and just let that run overnight. It's not a classy solution, but we have 2800, so I'm not complaining. And all of that prep work means that we can now make our Signalum cell frames. All that's left is to fill them with a lot of redstone. Alright, so now that we've gone through this whole rabbit hole, let's make our mob duplicator and set it up. Okay, so we have this mob duplicator now, and as we've discussed, it can help us get mob drops. I'm going to set it up here, just in the middle of this room with a mob crusher in front of it. And if we go below, we can see the wiring that I've set up. All I'm going to say is, prepare yourselves. It gets a little spaghetti. I warned you. So this whole mess right here is because I wanted to try to automate many mobs in one single mob duplicator. If we grab the wrench from Ender.io and set it to hide conduits, we can tell what's going on a little bit more easily. Each of these drawers is locked to a certain mob imprisonment tool with a mob inside: Enderman, Wither Skeleton, all of the thermal ones, and slimes. The conduits are set to only extract with a redstone signal, which is given to them if the level emitter turns on. Let's say I want this one to ensure that there are always 256 ender pearls in our system. Right now, there's only 44, so this turns on, this mob gets taken from here, and into the mob duplicator. Here, this will duplicate the existing mob, and this mob crusher will do its job, kill them, and send them back into our ME system. Because the drawers are locked, this one will only ever be able to have the Enderman. Same for the rest. So there's no need to worry about mismatches with the level emitters. The only thing that's missing, of course, is how do we get them out? I gave this a lot of thought, and maybe I'm missing something obvious, but I don't think it's possible to control what you take out of this based on a signal somewhere else. In order to get around this, I've set this to only extract on a redstone signal, and I'm just going to give it a timer. Let's try it out for 3 seconds. Now, in 3 seconds, our mob imprisonment tool disappears, but because this is still active, it gets sent right back. So until this turns off, this mob is going to keep being spawned here, assuming we give this a much longer duration. Now, everything should be in place, and the only thing missing is to give this guy the essence that it needs to spawn mobs. That's where this ender tank comes in. Our mob farm produces us tons of essence that I am currently just not using. So if we throw a tank back here and hook up some conduits, now essence is going through it. And over here, mobs are getting spawned and, well, crushed. All that's left is to extract them and send them back into our system. And to help us out with that mob duplicator, we can make a Fortune 3 add-on and put this in the mob crusher, which should greatly increase our odds. Alright, so it's been a while. Our mob crusher has been diligently crushing the mobs, and most importantly, the system works. All of the level emitters are now off because we have all of the drops that we wanted. The mob duplicator doesn't have any mobs in it, the system is working correctly, and yes, it is a little bit janky, but if it works, it works. If I go to Ender Pearls and take some out, you can hear they start to be spawned again, and then killed right away. Despite how cramped and weird this all might look, I'm actually really happy that I got this working. Sometimes you need to challenge yourself to make an automation fun. But now we can get back to our original point. We wanted to kill these mobs to make blizz powder that allowed us to make cryotheum dust, which lets us make the upgrade kits for thermal machines. And now that that's all automated, and now we can request those signalum upgrade kits that we'd wanted. Of course, all of these upgrade kits aren't going to do us much good if we don't have actual speed upgrades to put in them. So let's fix that real quick. Are you ready for the most satisfying sound? Alright, everything is now nice and upgraded. And now, if I request way more of a material, it goes real fast. And with that done, I think that's a pretty good spot to stop with the progression and transition into something a little bit more creative. Setting up AE2 and power and everything is cool, but at the end of the day, we're still kind of living out of a box. I think it's time that we get to building. And there we go. Our AE2 area now has a lot more of a theme going. I've gone for this cavernous look, sort of as if there were a cave underneath the mountain that the temple was built on, and as you might be able to tell from the skulls and the blood, it was not a good place to be. But between you and me, this isn't where I wanted the build to end. Having this stuff lying around like this is really bugging me, but I have spent hours trying to figure out how I want to incorporate all of these, and the honest truth is that right now, I'm stuck. In my experience, this is something that I just have to wait out and wait for some inspiration to come back to me. I don't dislike the idea. I think these pillars are pretty cool, and the actual cave shape is pretty alright. But there's a lot that I'm going to have to work out as far as colors, because, come on, this is really gray right now, and also decoration, how we're going to incorporate the drives and the drawers into everything. So even if it's a little anticlimactic, I'm going to call the episode here, and next episode is going to be a really, really big building episode. I hope you're ready for that one. Thank you all very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed all the progress that we got done today, and I hope to see you in the next episode. Stay cool.